They say weddings are where fairy tales come true, but at my brother Christopher's wedding, I watched mine burn to ashes. My name is Ella Hamilton. I'm 40 years old, and until 3 hours ago, I believed I knew exactly who I was. The daughter of successful entrepreneurs, the wife of a brilliant architect, the sister of an unstoppable man. I was wrong about all of it. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments which country you're watching from. Your participation keeps this community alive. What I'm about to tell you isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about a conspiracy that started before I was even born. About two mothers who sacrificed everything. And about the moment I discovered that my entire life had been built on a lie meant to protect me. Everything changed on a Saturday afternoon in May in a 5-star hotel in downtown Chicago. The ballroom was decorated with white orchids and crystal chandeliers. Soft jazz played in the background. My brother Christopher, handsome in his tailored tuxedo, was about to marry Sabrina Moore, a successful marketing executive. Everyone smiled. Everyone celebrated. No one suspected that in less than an hour, that perfect wedding would become the stage for the most devastating revelation of our lives. And now I'm going to tell you how it all began. The ceremony was scheduled to start at 4 p.m. At 3:47, I realized my husband Victor had disappeared. He'd been by my side just moments before, his arm around my waist, whispering how proud he was of Christopher. Victor Sterling, 43 years old, award-winning architect, the man I'd loved for 15 years and married for 12, the man who still made my heart skip when he smiled at me. Or so I thought. I searched for him in the main hall. He wasn't there. I checked the bar area. Nothing. Someone mentioned they'd seen him heading toward the outdoor terrace on the second floor. I took the elevator alone, my heels clicking against the marble floor. The terrace was a secluded spot overlooking the city skyline. Couples sometimes went there for privacy during events. As I approached, I heard voices, low murmurs, a woman's soft laughter. My heart began to race without knowing why. Through the glass door, partially hidden by elegant curtains, I saw them. Victor and Sabrina Moore, my brother's bride. She was still wearing her pristine wedding dress, the one she'd spent months choosing. The dress that cost $15,000. The dress she was supposed to wear while pledging her life to my brother. But now she looked nothing like the sweet, sophisticated woman who'd won Christopher's heart. Victor's hands were on her waist, her arms were wrapped around his neck, and they were kissing. Not a peck, not an accident. A deep, passionate, desperate kiss. The kind that tells a story of familiarity, of routine, of months, maybe years, of secret meetings. Time stopped. My lungs forgot how to breathe. My legs turned to stone. I wanted to scream, to run, to burst through that door and tear them apart. But I couldn't move. And then I heard their words. Words that would haunt me forever. "You're taking such a risk, darling," Sabrina whispered, her fingers playing with Victor's collar. "Meeting here right now in the middle of my wedding." Victor laughed, a cold, arrogant laugh I'd never heard before. "Risk? Please, that fool Christopher is too busy playing the perfect groom, and your husband's sister—" He paused. "Ella's so naive, she wouldn't suspect a thing even if we told her directly." That fool. Naive. The words hit me like physical blows. "Still," Sabrina continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I'm nervous. What if everything falls apart later? What if they find out about the plan? And Victor, I don't like the idea of you staying married to her." Victor cupped her face in his hands. "Listen to me. Ella means nothing. I married her for one reason only, access to the Hamilton Group. She was my key to the family fortune. That's all she's ever been." My vision blurred with tears. "Once we execute the plan with Donovan," he continued, "once we drain the company dry and transfer everything offshore, I'll find a way to get rid of her. Make it look like an accident, or maybe just a quiet divorce after she's been discredited. She'll be left with nothing, and no one will believe her. And Christopher? Sabrina asked. Your sweet, trusting fiancé? Victor smirked. He'll be destroyed financially and emotionally. Donovan will sweep in, acquire Hamilton Group for pennies, and we'll get our cut. $5 million each, plus whatever we can skim before the collapse. And then we can finally be together, Sabrina purred. No more hiding. No more pretending to love that boring corporate drone. No more pretending, Victor echoed, pulling her close again. I turned and ran. My heels caught on the carpet. I stumbled, caught myself, kept moving. Tears streamed down my face, but I held back the sobs. In the empty hallway, I collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. My marriage was a lie. My husband had used me as a pawn. And my brother, my strong, brilliant, protective brother, was about to marry a woman who'd been plotting to destroy him all along. I had to tell Christopher. I had to stop the wedding. But as I pushed myself off the wall and started toward the groom's suite, a hand caught my arm. I spun around, ready to scream. It was Christopher. My brother stood there in his tuxedo, looking impossibly handsome, his expression calm. Too calm. Ella, he said softly. I saw you running. What happened? I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, tears still flowing. Christopher's eyes, sharp, intelligent, knowing, studied my face. He'd always been able to read me like a book. Since we were kids, he'd been my protector. 5 years older, infinitely wiser, always there. You found out, he said simply. It wasn't a question. Chris, I saw them. Victor and Sabrina. They were kissing. They're planning something terrible. They want to destroy the company. They're working with someone named Donovan and— I know, Christopher interrupted. The world tilted. What? Christopher took my hand and led me into a small private room off the main corridor. He closed the door, locked it, and turned to face me. His expression was no longer that of a nervous groom. It was the face of a man at war, a face I'd seen before, when he'd defended me from bullies in school, when he'd fired executives who tried to embezzle from the company, when he'd stood over our parents' graves and vowed to protect their legacy. I've known for 3 months, he said. But this was just the beginning. What I discovered next was far worse. 3 months? I whispered, my voice breaking. Christopher nodded, his jaw set with the same determination I'd seen our father wear in difficult business negotiations. I started noticing things weren't right about 12 weeks ago. Sabrina showed unusual interest in the Hamilton Group's internal operations. She asked questions about quarterly reports, investment portfolios, operational vulnerabilities, things a fiancé wouldn't normally care about in such detail. My mind reeled. While I'd been living in blissful ignorance, my brother had been waging a secret war. And Victor, Christopher continued, his voice hardening with barely controlled anger. Your husband was too comfortable around her, too familiar, little glances, inside jokes, the way he'd find reasons to be alone with her when you weren't looking. Each word was a knife. I had a bad feeling, Christopher said, moving to the window. His broad shoulders were tense beneath his tuxedo jacket. So I hired a private investigator. What he found— He paused, his hands clenching into fists. It was worse than simple infidelity, Ella. It was a calculated conspiracy. He pulled out his phone and showed me a folder filled with photos and documents. Victor and Sabrina at expensive restaurants, hotel lobbies, his apartment while I was supposedly out of town on business, bank statements showing wire transfers from an offshore account to Sabrina's personal funds, and emails. So many emails. One made my blood run cold. Phase 1 complete. E is completely unsuspecting. C trusts S implicitly. Once we're married, we move to Phase 2. Donovan is ready with the acquisition team. 6 months max, and Hamilton Group will be history. Then we're free and rich. V. Donovan, I breathed. Who is he? Christopher's expression darkened in a way that frightened me. Gerard Donovan, CEO of Silvercrest Holdings, our biggest competitor, and... He hesitated. Someone with a very dark connection to our family's past. What do you mean? Christopher sat down slowly, and for the first time, I saw something I'd rarely seen in my strong older brother. Fear. Real, genuine fear. I don't know all the details yet, he admitted, his voice trembling slightly. But when I started investigating Donovan, I found something strange. Dad, our dad, Marcus Hamilton, used to work for a jewelry empire called Hart Jewels before he founded Hamilton Group. Hart Jewels. The name stirred something deep in my memory, but I couldn't grasp it. Hart Jewels collapsed 30 years ago under mysterious circumstances. The president died in a car crash along with his family, and Donovan, who was a junior executive then, somehow ended up with most of the assets. He built Silvercrest from those ruins. And you think this is connected? I know it is, Christopher said firmly. But then his composure cracked, just for a moment. His hands shook as he showed me the next image on his phone. Because 2 days ago, I received an anonymous package at my office. Inside was a single photograph. The photo was old, faded, taken at least 3 decades ago. It showed a young couple, a handsome man in a business suit, and a beautiful woman with dark hair and striking eyes. They were holding 2 small children, a boy and a girl, maybe 4 and 2 years old. The woman's eyes... I gasped. Those eyes looked exactly like mine. And the little boy. He had Christopher's distinctive jawline, even as a toddler. Who are they? I whispered, though something inside me already knew. Christopher's voice broke. I don't know for certain, but Ella, I think they might be our biological parents. The room spun. Biological? But Mom and Dad? Raised us, loved us, gave us everything, Christopher finished, tears now streaming down his face. But look at this. He showed me a note that had been included with the photo. The Hart family didn't die in that crash. One survived, and she's been watching over her children for 30 years, waiting for the right moment to expose the truth. Be careful, Christopher. Donovan knows you're digging. He'll stop at nothing to keep his secrets buried. Protect your sister. I couldn't process it. My marriage was a sham. My brother's wedding was a trap. And now, apparently, our entire identity was a lie. Christopher grabbed my hands, his fear now fully visible. My big brother, who'd never shown weakness in front of me, was terrified. Ella, I'm scared, he confessed. I've been playing this game for months, pretending I don't know, gathering evidence, planning this exposure. But what if I'm wrong? What if we confront them and they hurt you? What if... Stop, I said firmly, squeezing his hands. You're not wrong, and I'm not alone. Whatever happens today, we face it together, like we always have. A knock at the door interrupted us. Mr. Hamilton, 5 minutes to ceremony start, a coordinator called. Christopher wiped his eyes and stood tall, his moment of vulnerability passing. But I'd seen it, and it made me love him even more. He wasn't invincible. He was human. He was scared. But he was doing this anyway. For me, for our parents, for the truth. So what do? I asked. Call the police? Cancel the wedding? Run? Christopher took a deep breath, steadying himself. The fear in his eyes transformed into something else. Cold, calculated fury. No, he said. We let them think they've won. We let this wedding proceed exactly as planned. And then, in front of everyone, family, friends, the media, we expose everything. Chris, these people are dangerous. Which is why we need witnesses. Lots of them. He met my eyes. If we confront them privately, we disappear. But if we expose them publicly with irrefutable evidence, they can't silence everyone. But are you sure? What if... I'm not sure of anything, Christopher admitted quietly. But I'm sure of this. I won't let them destroy what Mom and Dad built. I won't let them use us and discard us like garbage, and I won't let whoever sent that photo, whoever's been protecting us, down. He took my hands again. I need you to do something for me. I need you to go back out there. Pretend everything's fine. Smile. Play your role, and when the moment comes, trust me. But Victor will get exactly what he deserves, Christopher said, his voice hardening again. They both will. I promise you, little sister. They will pay for every lie, every betrayal, every moment of pain they've caused us. He hugged me tightly. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, he whispered. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I needed to be absolutely certain. I needed to have everything ready. And Ella, I was afraid. Afraid of being wrong, afraid of putting you in danger, afraid of losing you like we might have lost our real parents. You won't lose me, I said fiercely. We're Hamiltons. Blood or not, we're family, and family fights together. But then I remembered something. Something Victor had said 6 months ago that suddenly made terrible sense. And that changed everything. The ceremony began at exactly 4 p.m. I sat in the front row, Victor beside me, his hand resting on my knee. The same hand that had caressed another woman's face an hour ago. The same hand that had signed our marriage certificate 12 years ago while already planning my destruction. I wanted to vomit, but I smiled. I played my part. The officiant spoke about love, trust, and lifelong commitment. Every word was acid on my tongue. Sabrina walked down the aisle, radiant and beautiful, carrying white lilies. She looked like an angel descended from heaven. She was a demon dressed in Vera Wang. Christopher stood at the altar, tall and composed, watching his bride approach. To everyone else, he looked nervous, excited, in love. But I knew better. I saw the steel in his eyes. I saw the predator waiting for his prey to step into the trap. The ceremony proceeded normally. Vows were exchanged. Sabrina's were particularly touching. Promises of loyalty, partnership, unconditional love, standing by him through every challenge. Lies, all lies. Christopher's vows were simpler, more direct. Sabrina, today I promise you the truth, always the truth, no matter how painful it might be. A few people chuckled, thinking it was romantic awkwardness. I knew better. It was a warning. Then came the ring exchange. A small flower girl brought forward the rings in a velvet box. Christopher and Sabrina reached for them. Wait. Christopher's voice cut through the romantic music like a blade. The entire ballroom fell silent. 300 guests held their breath. Before we continue, Christopher said, his voice calm but carrying to every corner of the room, I have something to say. Sabrina's face paled slightly. Chris, darling, what? I've been thinking a lot about marriage, Christopher continued, turning to address the audience. About what it means to pledge your life to someone, to trust them with your heart, your dreams, your future, your family's legacy. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Victor's hand tightened on my knee. I felt his tension, his confusion, his growing fear. Good. And I realized, Christopher said, that marriage should be built on truth, complete, absolute, unshakable truth. Don't you agree, Sabrina? Of course, Sabrina said carefully, her smile frozen like a mask. Then, let me tell everyone the truth about us, Christopher said. He turned to the technical team and nodded. The large screens on either side of the altar, meant to show romantic photos of the couple, suddenly flickered to life. But they didn't show romance. They showed Victor and Sabrina kissing on that terrace. The footage was crystal clear, high definition, time-stamped, undeniable. Gasps erupted throughout the ballroom like a wave. What? Sabrina started, her composure shattering. Oh, that's just the beginning. Christopher said coolly, his voice now carrying an edge of cold satisfaction. The screens changed. Now they showed emails, bank statements, meeting records. The entire conspiracy laid out in damning detail. Financial projections showing the planned collapse of Hamilton Group, wire transfers from offshore accounts, meeting notes with Gerard Donovan outlining the acquisition strategy. And audio began to play. Victor's voice filled the room, echoing from every speaker. I only married her for one reason, access to the Hamilton Group. That's all she's ever been, a key, a tool. Once we're done, I'll dispose of her like the useless thing she is. Every eye in the ballroom turned to look at me. I sat frozen, tears streaming down my face. But they weren't tears of weakness anymore. They were tears of rage, cleansing, purifying rage. Sabrina's voice followed. Christopher is so easy to manipulate. He thinks I'm this sweet, loving woman. He has no idea I find him boring. Once I have access to his accounts, once Donovan takes over the company, I'm gone. $5 million and a new life in Europe with Victor. That's the plan. The ballroom erupted in shocked exclamations, angry shouts, people standing to get a better look. Victor tried to stand, to leave, but I grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Sit down, I hissed through clenched teeth. You're going to watch every second of what you've done. On stage, Sabrina had dropped all pretense of innocence. Her sweet expression twisted into something ugly. Christopher, you don't understand. This is all edited. It's fake. Someone is trying to... Stop, Christopher interrupted, his voice carrying absolute authority. Just stop, Sabrina. I have 17 hours of surveillance footage. I have bank records going back 18 months. I have witness testimonies from hotel staff, restaurant servers, and 3 of Donovan's former employees who were willing to turn state's evidence. He stepped closer to her. You and Victor have been having an affair for 18 months. You infiltrated my life at a charity gala. But it wasn't chance, was it? You researched me. You learned my interests, my vulnerabilities, my dead mother's favorite flowers. You crafted a perfect persona to win my heart, all while planning to destroy everything my family built. His voice grew harder. All in partnership with Gerard Donovan, who's been trying to acquire Hamilton Group for decades. At the mention of Donovan's name, a middle-aged man in the VIP section stood abruptly. He was distinguished-looking, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Gerard Donovan. He'd been invited as a business associate, a gesture of goodwill between competitors. He was trying to leave. Mr. Donovan, Christopher called out, his voice sharp as broken glass. Please don't go. The show's just getting started, and you're the star. 2 men in dark suits appeared at the exit doors. FBI agents. Their badges glinted under the ballroom lights. Donovan froze, his face going gray. You see, Christopher continued, addressing the stunned crowd, this conspiracy goes much deeper than corporate espionage and infidelity. It goes back 30 years to a car crash that killed the president of Hart Jewels and his family. He pressed a button on his phone. New images appeared on the screens. Old newspaper clippings, police reports, accident scene photos that made people gasp and look away. Hart Jewels was once the premier jewelry empire in America. Its president, Richard Hart, was beloved and successful, a family man, a philanthropist. Until one day, his car went off a cliff in the Blue Ridge Mountains. 4 people died, or that's what the official report said. Christopher's voice grew stronger, more commanding. Everyone in the ballroom was riveted, unable to look away. But the truth is, one person survived that crash, Richard Hart's wife, Isabella. She was pulled from the wreckage by a Good Samaritan before the car exploded and burned everything beyond recognition. His voice caught slightly. That Samaritan was a woman named Margaret Hamilton, our mother. My breath stopped. The entire ballroom went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Margaret got Isabella to safety, Christopher continued, but they both realized the crash was no accident. It was murder. carefully orchestrated by a junior executive who wanted control of the company. A man who'd already embezzled millions, falsified records, and set up phantom accounts to drain Hart Jewels dry. All eyes turned to Donovan. His face had turned the color of ash. Isabella had 2 young children, Christopher said, and now his voice trembled with emotion he could no longer fully control. A son and a daughter. She knew if the killer discovered they'd survived, he'd come for them. Children are loose ends. Witnesses, threats. He looked directly at me. So she did the unthinkable. She let the world believe she'd died with her husband. She entrusted her children to Margaret Hamilton, who'd just lost her own babies to miscarriage and was desperate to be a mother. I couldn't breathe. Those children, Christopher said, his voice breaking, were named Ethan and Emma Hart. But the world came to know them as Christopher and Ella Hamilton. The ballroom erupted in shocked exclamations. People were crying, shouting, demanding answers. "That's a lie!" Donovan shouted, his composure finally shattering. "This is slander. This is a fabrication. I'll sue you for what?" Christopher challenged, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Telling the truth? We have evidence, Mr. Donovan. 30 years of evidence. Bank records showing how you systematically looted Hart Jewels. Witness testimonies from people you bribed or threatened into silence for 3 decades. Forensic accountants who've traced every stolen dollar." He held up a small recording device. And this was found in Richard Hart's office, hidden behind a portrait of his family. It recorded his final conversation before his death. The conversation where you threatened him. Where you said, and I quote, Christopher pressed play. An old, scratchy recording filled the ballroom. A man's voice, cold, threatening. "Sign over those accounts, Richard, or you and your family won't live to see Christmas. It's that simple. Sign or die." Another voice, calm, principled, unafraid. "I'll never sign. And I've already contacted the authorities. It's over, Gerard. Turn yourself in before this gets worse." The first voice again, now filled with rage. "You've made your choice. Remember that when they find your bodies." The color drained completely from Donovan's face. "It's all over," Christopher said quietly. "For all of you." FBI agents moved through the crowd, approaching Donovan, Victor, and Sabrina. Victor tried to bolt, jumping to his feet. 2 agents grabbed him, forcing his arms behind his back. "Get off me. This is insane. I'm a victim here. They're framing me." But his protests fell on deaf ears. Sabrina collapsed to her knees in her $15,000 wedding dress, mascara running down her face, all beauty and sophistication gone. "Please, Christopher, please. I love you. I was confused. Donovan manipulated me. Victor seduced me. I'm a victim too." "Save it for your lawyer," Christopher said coldly. Donovan straightened his tie with shaking hands, trying to maintain some dignity. "Christopher Hamilton," one of the agents said formally, approaching the altar. "On behalf of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, thank you for your cooperation in this matter. We'll take it from here." As they led the conspirators away in handcuffs, the ballroom remained in stunned, breathless silence. Christopher descended from the altar and came to me. He took my hands, and I saw tears streaming down his strong face. All the fear, all the weight he'd been carrying alone for 3 months, finally released. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry you had to go through this. Sorry you had to find out about Victor this way. Sorry I couldn't protect you from this pain." I hugged him tightly, both of us crying now. "You saved us," I said. "You saved us both." "No," Christopher said, pulling back to look at me. "We saved each other. I couldn't have done this alone. When I saw you running from that terrace, I knew the time had come. You finding out was the catalyst. We exposed them together." He wiped his eyes. "Our mother," I said. "Isabella. Is she alive?" Christopher's expression became sad, pained. "I don't know. I've been searching. The last confirmed sighting was 5 years ago in Paris. She's been living under assumed names, always moving, always hiding, but she's been watching us, Ella, protecting us from afar. Then we find her, I said firmly. We find her and we bring her home. And that's when I realized our story wasn't over. What we did next, no one expected. The trial took place 6 months later. Gerard Donovan, Victor Sterling, and Sabrina Moore faced multiple charges: conspiracy to commit fraud, industrial espionage, attempted murder for the heart crash, racketeering, and dozens of financial crimes. The evidence was overwhelming. The recording from Richard Hart's office. 30 years of financial documents, meticulously preserved by Marcus Hamilton before his death. Testimonies from witnesses who'd been silenced by fear or money, but were now finally free to speak. And something else Christopher had discovered: forensic evidence from the original crash scene that had been suppressed by corrupt officials on Donovan's payroll. The driver of the car that day wasn't the Hart family's regular driver. He was a man with mob connections who'd been paid $50,000 by Donovan to tamper with the brakes. That driver had died in a suspicious accident 3 days after the crash. A convenient overdose, tying up loose ends. I attended every day of the trial. I needed to see Victor's face as the truth destroyed him piece by piece. On the witness stand, he tried to play the victim. "I loved Ella," he claimed, his voice breaking theatrically. "I made mistakes. Yes, terrible mistakes, but I never meant to hurt her. Sabrina manipulated me. Donovan threatened my career, my life. I was trapped in a nightmare. Lies." The prosecutor played the tape of him calling me useless and nothing but a key to the family fortune. The jury's faces hardened with disgust. One woman juror wiped away tears, looking at me with such compassion. Sabrina's testimony was even more pathetic. She blamed everything on Donovan, claiming she was young and desperate when he recruited her. "I was in debt," she sobbed dramatically. "He offered me a way out. I didn't know the full extent of his crimes. I thought it was just corporate competition, not murder." But emails showed she'd volunteered for the scheme enthusiastically, that she'd spent months researching Christopher, learning everything about him, that she'd practiced her sweet fiancée persona like an actress preparing for a role. She'd even written in one email, "This is going to be the easiest money I've ever made. Christopher is so desperate for love after his mother's death, he's like a puppy. Pathetic." Christopher sat beside me during that testimony, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might break. Donovan himself remained largely silent throughout the trial. His expensive lawyers tried every trick, attacking the chain of evidence, questioning witness credibility, claiming the 30-year-old recording was inadmissible. But the prosecution was relentless. They'd built a case so airtight that even the best legal team in the country couldn't poke meaningful holes. On the final day, when given a chance to speak before sentencing, Donovan stood. His expensive suit hung loosely on him now. Prison and stress had aged him decades in just 6 months. "I'm not asking for mercy," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "I know what I've done. I've spent 30 years building an empire on blood and lies. I destroyed the Hart family. I ruined countless lives, employees, investors, competitors. And for what? Money? Power? Status?" He looked directly at Christopher and me. "It's all worthless now. Every dollar, every asset, every moment of so-called success, all of it meaningless." His voice cracked, and for the first time, he looked genuinely human, broken, destroyed, remorseful. "If Isabella Hart is still alive," he said, tears streaming down his weathered face, "tell her I'm sorry. Tell her that not a day has passed without her husband's face haunting my dreams. Tell her Richard Hart was 10 times the man I could ever be. Tell her—" He paused, his entire body shaking. "Tell her she won. Tell her love won. Tell her I lost everything that ever mattered while she kept the most precious thing, her children's lives." The courtroom was silent except for muffled sobs. Even some of the prosecutors looked moved. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Donovan received life in prison without possibility of parole. Victor got 25 years. Sabrina got 15. Several of Donovan's accomplices received sentences ranging from 5 to 12 years. As they were led away, Victor tried to catch my eye one final time. His expression was pleading, desperate, pathetic. I looked right through him as if he were made of glass. He no longer existed to me. He was less than nothing. After the trial, Christopher and I stood outside the courthouse, facing a sea of reporters and cameras. "Mr. Hamilton, Ms. Hamilton, how does it feel to see justice served?" one reporter asked, shoving a microphone toward us. Christopher stepped forward, and I was struck by how much he'd aged in 6 months. The stress, the weight of revelation had carved new lines around his eyes. But he stood tall and strong. "Justice isn't just about punishment," he said calmly, his voice measured and thoughtful. "It's about truth. For 30 years, our biological mother lived in hiding, unable to see her children grow up, unable to reclaim her life or her identity. For 30 years, a murderer walked free, profiting from his crimes, destroying more lives." He paused, composing himself. "Today, the truth has been revealed. Today, the guilty have been held accountable. But the real victory isn't this verdict. It's that we survived. We thrived. And we didn't let hatred consume us or turn us into monsters like the people who hurt our family." "Will you try to find your biological mother?" another reporter asked. I answered this time, my voice stronger than I'd expected. "We already have," I said softly. The crowd murmured, cameras flashing like lightning. 3 months ago, I continued, pulling out a letter with trembling hands, "we received this. From Paris. It was from Isabella Hart, our mother." I unfolded the delicate paper, my vision blurring with tears. She told us she'd watched us our whole lives, that she attended our graduations, sitting in the back row where we wouldn't recognize her, that she cried at my wedding. My voice broke. Knowing I deserved better than Victor, but unable to intervene without exposing us to danger. Christopher put his arm around me, giving me strength. "She told us she was proud," I continued, "that Margaret and Marcus Hamilton had raised us to be strong, intelligent, compassionate people, and that she'd finally decided to come forward because—" I couldn't finish. Christopher took over, his voice thick with emotion. "Because she's dying," he said quietly. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She has maybe 6 months, possibly less. She's been in hospice care in Paris under the name Isabelle Durant." "Will you go to her?" a reporter asked gently, her own eyes wet. "We're flying out tonight," Christopher answered. "We're going to spend whatever time she has left learning about the mother we never knew, about our father, about who we really are, about the family we lost and the legacy we carry." "And the Hamilton group?" someone called out. Christopher smiled slightly, and in that smile I saw echoes of both Marcus Hamilton and the Father Tentar Novament, continuor we'd never known. Richard Hart. "We'll continue, stronger than ever," he said firmly. "Because we're not just Hamilton men and women. We're Hart legacy bearers too. And we don't break. We don't surrender. We build. We heal. We create something better from the ashes of what was destroyed." He looked at me, then back at the cameras. "My father, Marcus Hamilton, taught me that business is about integrity first, profit second. My biological father, Richard Hart, built an empire on honesty and compassion. That's the legacy we'll honor, both of them, all 4 of our parents." The questions continued, but we politely excused ourselves. We had a plane to catch, and a mother to finally meet. But what came next wasn't just reunion. It was something much more powerful. The flight to Paris felt endless. Christopher and I sat side by side in first class, both too nervous to sleep, too anxious to eat. We'd seen recent photos of Isabella, sent by her hospice nurse, A kind woman named Marie. She was thin, frail, her once dark hair now silver white. Illness had stolen her strength, but not her beauty. But her eyes, those eyes were mine. And her smile, in one photograph where she'd managed a weak grin. That smile was Christopher's. We arrived at the hospice just before dawn. It was a beautiful place on the outskirts of Paris, overlooking a small garden filled with roses and lavender. The morning air smelled of flowers and fresh bread from a nearby bakery. Marie met us at the entrance, her eyes red from crying. "She's been waiting for you," Marie said in accented English, her voice trembling. "She's very weak today. The pain is significant, but she's lucid, and so very, very excited. She made me promise to do her hair, to put on lipstick. She said, 'I want to be beautiful when my babies come home.'" Christopher's composure cracked. This strong man who'd orchestrated an elaborate counter-conspiracy, who'd stood unflinching in court, who'd exposed corporate criminals in front of 300 people. He broke down and sobbed. Marie led us down a quiet hallway lined with soft watercolor paintings. We passed other rooms where elderly patients slept or watched television or received visitors, but our focus was singular. At the end of the hall, Marie stopped at a door marked Durant. She knocked gently, then opened it. "Madame Isabelle, your children are here." The woman in the bed looked impossibly small against the white sheets. An IV drip fed medication into her arm. Monitors beeped softly, measuring a heartbeat that was growing weaker by the day. But when she saw us, her entire face transformed. The pain lines softened. The exhaustion lifted. Pure joy radiated from her like sunlight. "My babies," she whispered, her voice barely audible. And despite 3 decades apart, despite being strangers in every practical sense, we ran to her. We held her fragile body between us. We cried together, 3 decades of separation, pain, sacrifice, and love flowing out in a torrent of tears. "Let me look at you," Isabella said, her hands trembling as she cupped our faces. Oh my God, you're so beautiful, so strong, so alive." Her eyes moved from me to Christopher and back again, drinking us in as if trying to memorize every detail. "You look just like your father," she told Christopher, touching his face with wonder. "Same jaw, same eyes, same noble expression. Richard would be so proud of the man you've become." Then she turned to me. "And you, Emma. I'm sorry, Ella. You're the perfect combination of both of us. My eyes, your father's kindness. You're exactly what I dreamed you'd become." "Why didn't you ever come back?" I asked through tears, the question that had haunted me for months finally spoken aloud. "Why didn't you let us know you were alive?" "Because keeping you safe was more important than being with you," Isabella said simply, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. Donovan had connections everywhere. Police chiefs, judges, politicians, organized crime. If he'd discovered you survived, he would have killed you without hesitation. Children are witnesses, loose ends, threats to his empire. She coughed, and Marie quickly helped her take a sip of water. "The only way to keep you safe was to stay dead," Isabella continued, "to let the world believe the entire Hart family perished in that crash. It was the hardest decision I've ever made, harder than anything you can imagine. But you've been watching us," Christopher said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every moment I could," Isabella confirmed, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "I attended your school plays, sitting in the very back row with a scarf and sunglasses. I was at your graduations, both high school and college. I saw you receive your business awards, Christopher. I watched you give your first major presentation to investors." She looked at me. "I was at your wedding, Ella. Sitting in the last pew of the church, my heart breaking because I knew Victor was wrong for you. My investigators had already flagged him as suspicious, but I couldn't intervene, not without exposing you to danger." "How did you know about the conspiracy?" I asked. "I've never stopped watching Donovan," Isabella said, her voice hardening despite her weakness. For 30 years, I've tracked his every move. I hired investigators, accountants, lawyers working in secret. I documented everything, waiting for the right moment. When I learned he was targeting you through Victor and Sabrina, when I realized he was trying to destroy you the way he destroyed your father, she gripped Christopher's hand with surprising strength. I couldn't stay silent anymore, even if it meant revealing myself, even if it meant risking the last months of my life. I had to give you the tools to fight back. You saved us, Christopher said, his voice breaking. No, Isabella corrected gently. You saved yourselves. I just gave you the final piece of the puzzle. The rest, the courage, the intelligence, the strategy, the strength to stand in front of everyone and expose the truth, that was all you. That was the Hart legacy and the Hamilton upbringing combined. You are the best of all 4 of your parents. For the next 2 weeks, we barely left her side. Marie set up cots in the room so we could sleep nearby. We learned about our family history, about the Hart legacy, about the grandmother and grandfather we'd never known. Isabella told us about Richard Hart, how he'd built Hart Jewels from a single small shop, how he'd been honest in an industry rife with corruption, how he'd treated every employee like family. He proposed to me with a ring he'd designed himself, Isabella said, showing us a photograph of a stunning emerald-cut diamond. He said, Isabella, I'm not offering you wealth or status. I'm offering you a life of purpose, integrity, and love. Will you build something meaningful with me? She smiled at the memory. I said yes before he finished the sentence. She told us about the day we were born, Christopher first, then me 2 years later, about our first steps, first words, the way Christopher had been fiercely protective of me, even as a toddler. You once punched a boy who pushed Emma off a swing, Isabella told Christopher with a weak laugh. You were 4 years old, and you marched right up to him and said, "Nobody hurts my sister." Richard had to pull you away before you started a war in the playground. Christopher laughed through his tears. Some things never change. She told us about the growing threat of Gerard Donovan, the warning signs they'd missed or dismissed, about the crash itself, the moment she realized the brakes had failed, the terror as the car went over the cliff, the explosion, the fire. I was thrown clear somehow, Isabella said, her voice distant with the memory, landing in trees that broke my fall. I was badly injured, broken ribs, fractured leg, severe burns, but I was alive. And then I heard your father screaming my name, screaming for Ethan and Emma. And then, silence. She closed her eyes, tears flowing. Margaret Hamilton stopped her car when she saw the smoke. She climbed down that cliff, heavily pregnant, risking her own life and her baby's life, to see if anyone survived. She pulled me out. She saved me. And when she saw you two in the car, still breathing, still alive, Isabella's voice broke completely. She got you out, both of you, minutes before the car exploded completely. She risked everything for strangers, for us. Christopher and I held her hands, all of us crying. Margaret lost her babies 3 weeks later, Isabella continued. The stress, the physical exertion, the trauma. She miscarried, but she told me something I'll never forget. She said, "God took my babies but gave me yours to save. That's not tragedy, that's purpose." She looked at us with infinite love. When we realized Donovan would hunt for survivors, when we understood the danger you were in, Margaret offered to take you, to raise you as her own, to give you the safe, normal life I couldn't provide while in hiding. And you agreed? I asked, though I already knew the answer. It destroyed me, Isabella admitted, her voice raw with 3 decades of pain. But yes, because I loved you more than I loved being your mother. Do you understand that? I loved you so much that I gave you away. I sacrificed every moment of watching you grow, every hug, every bedtime story, every milestone, because keeping you alive was more important than keeping you with me. It did make sense. Perfect, agonizing sense. Marcus Hamilton, Margaret's husband, he knew the truth? Christopher asked. Yes, he was a good man, honest, brave. He helped me disappear, set me up with a new identity, made sure I had money and resources. He took all the evidence from the original investigation, everything that pointed to Donovan's guilt, and hid it away in a secure location, knowing someday it might be needed. She smiled weakly. And he loved you both, as if you were his own blood. Margaret wrote to me over the years, sending secret letters through intermediaries. She told me how proud Marcus was of you, Christopher, when you took over the company, how he'd brag about you to his colleagues, how he saw you as his son in every way that mattered. They never told us, I said softly. Because I asked them not to, Isabella said. I thought if you knew the truth, you might try to find me, and that would put you at risk. Better you live your whole lives never knowing, never being in danger, than to know and become Donovan's targets. But you sent the photo, Christopher said, the one that started everything. Why then? Isabella's expression became resolute despite her weakness. Because I'm dying. I have nothing left to lose. And when my investigators informed me about the conspiracy against Hamilton Group, when I realized Donovan was trying to destroy you the way he'd destroyed Richard, she gripped our hands tightly. I couldn't stay silent anymore, even if it meant revealing myself, even if it meant you'd hate me for abandoning you. I had to give you the weapons to fight back. I had to try to save you one last time, even from beyond the grave if necessary. We could never hate you, I said fiercely. Never. You saved us, Christopher repeated. You gave us the truth. You gave us justice. You gave us ourselves. We stayed with Isabella for 14 precious days. Each day she grew a little weaker. The pain medication increased. The lucid periods became shorter. But when she was awake and aware, we made every moment count. We showed her photos of our lives, school pictures, business achievements, vacations, friends. We told her stories that made her laugh despite the pain. We filled in 30 years of blanks, trying to compress 3 decades into 2 weeks. And on the morning of the 15th day, with both of us holding her hands, with the sun rising over the Paris garden outside her window, Isabella took her last breath. Peacefully, without pain, with a smile on her face. Marie said she'd never seen anyone die so peacefully. She was ready, Marie told us gently. She'd been holding on, waiting for you. But once she saw you, once she knew you were safe and strong and together, she could let go. We buried her next to our father in a small cemetery on the outskirts of Paris. Richard and Isabella Hart, reunited at last after 30 years of separation. The headstone read, Isabella Hart, beloved wife and mother. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. John 15:13. At the funeral, only a handful of people attended. Marie, a few other hospice workers who'd cared for Isabella, and an elderly man who introduced himself as Jacques Moreau. I helped your mother during her years in hiding, he explained in French-accented English. I was a friend of your father's. When I learned Isabella had survived, I did everything I could to help her stay safe, to watch over you from afar. He handed Christopher a sealed envelope. She asked me to give you this after she was gone. We opened it right there, standing beside the fresh grave. Inside was a key and a note in Isabella's elegant handwriting. My darling Ethan and Emma, in a safety deposit box at Banque Nationale in Geneva, box Larga 4729, you'll find everything your father and I built together. The original Hart Jewels designs and patents, investment accounts we set up for your future, legal documents proving your identity and inheritance. But more importantly, you'll find letters. Hundreds of letters I wrote to you over the years but never sent. Letters for every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone I missed. Read them. Know that you were loved every single day of your lives, even when I couldn't be there. Use what we left you to build something beautiful. Something that honors not just your father and me, but Margaret and Marcus too. All four of your parents who loved you beyond measure. Live fully. Love fearlessly. Trust carefully. And know that even in death, I am watching over you still. You are, and have always been, my greatest achievement, my proudest legacy, my reason for every sacrifice. With eternal love, your mother, Isabella Hart P.S. Christopher, be the man your father was. Ella, be the woman you already are. And never, ever let anyone make you forget who you truly are. Hart children raised by Hamiltons, the perfect combination of two great legacies. We did go to Geneva. We opened that safety deposit box, and we found exactly what she'd promised. Financial assets worth millions, carefully invested and grown over 3 decades. Patents and designs for jewelry pieces that would revolutionize the industry. Legal documents establishing our true identities and rightful inheritance. And 372 letters. One for every significant moment she'd missed. Letters about first days of school she'd watched from across the street. Letters about first heartbreaks she'd heard about through her investigators. Letters about college acceptances, job promotions, achievements great and small. Letters of advice she'd never been able to give in person. Letters of dreams and hopes and a mother's endless, boundless love. We read them all, every single one. It took us 3 days, reading aloud to each other, crying and laughing and grieving and healing. By the time we finished, we'd cried enough tears to fill an ocean. But we also felt complete. We knew who we were. Not just Hamilton heirs, not just Hart children, but the beloved sons and daughters of 4 extraordinary people who'd each sacrificed everything for us. 2 years later, Christopher and I stood together at the ribbon-cutting ceremony in downtown Chicago, the Isabella and Richard Hart Foundation for Families in Crisis. We'd used the Hart inheritance to create something meaningful, a network of safe houses, legal services, witness protection assistance, and financial support for families fleeing corporate corruption, domestic violence, and organized crime. Margaret and Marcus Hamilton had left us the business acumen and ethical framework. Richard and Isabella Hart had left us the resources and the legacy of integrity. Together, we'd created something that honored all 4. I'd divorced Victor, obviously. The process was mercifully quick once his criminal convictions came through. His assets were seized, his reputation destroyed, his career in ruins. I heard he was working in a prison library, teaching other inmates basic literacy. Perhaps he was finally learning something about real value. I'd also met someone new, Derek Thompson, one of the FBI agents who'd worked our case. He was patient, kind, honest, and understood that I needed time to heal. We were taking things slowly, building trust brick by brick, learning what real love looked like after experiencing its counterfeit. Christopher, for his part, had thrown himself into running both companies, Hamilton Group and the revived Hart Jewels. He worked 16-hour days, channeling his pain into purpose. He'd had a few dates here and there, but nothing serious. "I'm married to the work right now," he'd say with a tired smile. "Maybe someday I'll be ready to trust someone again, but not yet." I understood. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. The Hamilton Group had not only survived the scandal, it had thrived. Turns out, radical transparency and ethical business practices are actually excellent for long-term success. Who knew? We'd implemented whistleblower protections, ethics committees, and regular third-party audits. We became the company our parents, all 4 of them, would have been proud of. And Hart Jewels? We'd revived the brand with a twist. Every piece bore both names, Hart Hamilton Jewels, past and present, united, legacy and future intertwined. On the day of the foundation's opening, As I stood before the crowd preparing to speak, an elderly woman approached me. She was probably in her 70s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "I knew your mother," she said softly. "Margaret. We were best friends from childhood until she passed." "Thank you for coming," I said, my heart suddenly full. "She would be so proud of you," the woman continued, her eyes glistening with tears. "Both of you. Margaret used to tell me that her greatest fear was that one day you'd learn the truth and feel betrayed, would feel like she'd lied to you your whole lives." She took my hand. "But looking at what you've built, at the people you've become, at how you've honored all four of your parents, she'd know she made the right choice. She'd know that love, real, sacrificial love, is what makes a family. Not blood, not biology, love." I hugged her tightly, this stranger who carried memories of a mother I'd thought I knew completely. "Tell me about her," I said. "Tell me everything." And she did. Over coffee that afternoon, she shared stories of Margaret Hamilton, the woman who couldn't have children of her own, who'd prayed for a miracle, and who'd found that miracle in the most tragic circumstances imaginable. "She never once thought of you as anything but her children," the woman said. "Not adopted, not someone else's. Hers, completely and wholly hers. She used to say, 'God didn't give me children from my body. He gave me children from my heart, and that's even more precious.'" She wiped her eyes. "When she died 7 years ago, you did know she passed, didn't you?" I nodded, fighting back tears. "Her final words were about you," the woman continued. "She was in the hospital, Marcus holding her hand. She looked at him and said, 'Tell my babies they were my greatest joy. Tell them every sacrifice was worth it. Tell them I'd do it all again 1,000 times over. Tell them that love makes us family, and they will always, always be mine.'" I broke down completely. Christopher, who'd joined us, held me as I sobbed, not from pain anymore, but from the overwhelming realization of how deeply, completely, sacrificially we'd been loved. By 4 parents, each one giving up something precious so we could have a future. That evening, Christopher and I drove to the cemetery where Margaret and Marcus were buried. We'd visited before, of course, but never with full understanding. Now we stood before their headstones with flowers, tears, and finally, the right words. "Thank you," Christopher whispered, kneeling in the grass. "Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for protecting us. Thank you for loving us when you didn't have to, when it cost you everything." I placed my hand on Margaret's headstone, warm from the afternoon sun. "I understand now," I said aloud, my voice strong despite the tears. What Isabella meant when she said loving us was more important than being our mother. You both loved us that way too. You loved us enough to carry a terrible secret your whole lives. You loved us enough to let us believe a beautiful truth that kept us safe. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of roses from a nearby grave. For just a moment, I could have sworn I felt a hand on my shoulder, warm, comforting, maternal. "We're going to make you proud," Christopher promised, standing beside me. "The Hamilton Group, the Heart Foundation, everything we build, it's all in honor of you, all 4 of you. We carry your legacy forward, and we'll never forget the price you paid for our lives." We stayed until the sun set, talking to parents who couldn't answer but who we knew, somehow, were listening. 6 months later, Derek proposed. We were hiking in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Ironically, not far from where the Hart family's car had crashed all those years ago. But we weren't there to mourn. We were there to celebrate life. "I know you've been through hell," Derek said, down on one knee on a rocky overlook. "I know trust doesn't come easy anymore. I know you've seen the worst of what people can do. But Ella, I promise you, I will spend every day of my life proving that some people mean what they say, that some promises don't break, that some love is real, honest, and forever." I said yes, not because I'd forgotten the pain, but because I'd learned that pain doesn't have to define you, that betrayal doesn't have to make you bitter, that you can survive the worst and still choose to believe in the best. We were married in a small ceremony at the Hart Foundation garden. No elaborate ballrooms, no grand productions, no risk of drama or exposure, just truth, just love, just us and the people who truly mattered. Christopher was my man of honor, standing beside me with pride in his eyes. He cried during the vows, real, genuine tears of joy for his little sister. Afterward, he pulled me aside. "I'm proud of you," he said, "for being brave enough to try again, for not letting Victor's betrayal close your heart forever." "What about you?" I asked gently. "When are you going to let yourself be happy again? To trust someone?" Christopher smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "Maybe someday," he said, "but right now, I'm okay. I have the companies, I have the foundation, I have you and your new family. That's enough. That's more than enough." I hugged him tight, my big brother who'd saved us both. "You deserve love too," I whispered. "Real love. The kind that doesn't use you or betray you." "I know," he said softly, "but I'm not ready yet. Maybe I never will be, and I've made peace with that." 5 years after that devastating day at the hotel, I received a package at my office. No return address. Inside was a leather journal, old and worn, with delicate pages yellowed by time. The first page read, "The Private Diary of Isabella Hart." For my children, when they're ready to know everything. I called Christopher immediately, my hands shaking. "You need to come over, right now." That night, we sat together on my living room floor, Derek nearby but giving us space, the journal open between us. Isabella had documented everything. Every birthday she'd missed, sitting in her car outside our houses, watching through windows. Every achievement she'd celebrated from the shadows. Every time Donovan's people had gotten too close and she'd had to move, disappear, sacrifice seeing us again to keep us safe. There were sketches of us at different ages, drawn from memory and distant observation. There were pressed flowers from our graduation ceremonies that she'd picked up after everyone left. There were ticket stubs from our business presentations, our awards ceremonies, our lives. And on the final page, dated just 3 days before she died, she'd written, "My darling Ethan and Emma, by now you know the whole truth. Every secret, every sacrifice, every moment of pain and love that shaped your lives. I pray you don't hate me for the choices I made. I pray you understand that every day away from you was agony, but every day you were safe was worth it. You've become extraordinary people, intelligent, compassionate, strong, principled. Your fathers would be so proud. I am so proud." Margaret wrote to me once, many years ago. She said, "Isabella, your children are thriving. They're happy. They're loved. They're safe. You gave them life, and I've given them a childhood. Together, we've given them everything." She was right. We were a team, separated by necessity, but united in love for you. Live your lives fully. Love fearlessly but wisely. Build legacies that matter. And know that even in death, all 4 of your parents are watching over you still, smiling at the magnificent humans you've become. You are, and have always been, my greatest achievement, my proudest legacy, my reason for every sacrifice. The pain was worth it. Every moment was worth it. Because you're here, you're alive, you're thriving, and that's all a mother could ever ask for. With eternal love, your mother, Isabella Hart. We cried, of course, but they were good tears, healing tears, tears that washed away the last remnants of confusion, anger, and pain, leaving only gratitude and peace. 10 years after the wedding that never was, Christopher and I stood together once more in downtown Chicago, this time at the unveiling of a memorial sculpture in the city's central plaza. It depicted 4 figures, 2 couples standing side by side, their hands joined in the center where 2 children stood, safe, and protected. The plaque read, "In honor of all parents who sacrifice for their children. In memory of Isabella Hart, Richard Hart, Margaret Hamilton, and Marcus Hamilton, who showed us that love comes in many forms, that family is built not just by blood, but by choice, courage, and unconditional devotion, and that the greatest love is willing to give up everything for those it cherishes most." The mayor spoke. Community leaders spoke. Families helped by our foundation shared their stories. And when it was my turn to address the crowd of thousands, I looked out and saw reflected there the full spectrum of human experience: pain and joy, loss and hope, endings and new beginnings. "My story," I began, my voice carrying through the microphone across the plaza, "is about betrayal. But it's also about revelation. About discovering that the life I thought was a lie was actually built on the most profound truth of all, that love willing to sacrifice everything is the purest love there is." I paused, gathering my thoughts, feeling Derek's supportive presence beside me and Christopher's strength at my other side. I was 40 years old when I discovered my husband never loved me, when I learned my brother's fiancée was using him, when I found out our entire identity was constructed to save our lives. I could have let that destroy me. I could have become bitter, cynical, closed off to love forever. My voice grew stronger. But I had 4 parents who taught me, through their actions, through their impossible sacrifices, that the appropriate response to betrayal isn't more betrayal. The response to lies isn't cynicism. The response to pain isn't shutting down. Applause began to ripple through the crowd. The response is to become so thoroughly, completely, radiantly yourself that no lie can ever define you again. More applause, building like a wave. "My brother and I were given a second chance," I continued. "A chance to reclaim our story, to honor those who loved us, to build something meaningful from the ashes of what was destroyed. But here's what I want you to know. You don't need a dramatic conspiracy or a sensational revelation to reclaim your story. Every single day, you have the power to choose who you'll be, who you'll trust, what you'll stand for. You have the power to turn your pain into purpose. You have the power to take a truth that was hidden and use it as a foundation for something beautiful. You have the power to look at betrayal and say, 'You don't get to write my ending.'" The crowd was silent now, thousands of people hanging on every word. To anyone listening who's been lied to, used, betrayed, discarded, I see you. Your pain is real. Your anger is justified. Your grief is valid. But please, please don't let it be the final word in your story. Because the people who tried to destroy us, they're in prison now. They lost everything that mattered. But we're standing here. We're thriving. We've built foundations that will help thousands of people for generations. We won. My voice rang out clear and strong. Not through revenge, not through hatred, not through becoming like the people who hurt us, but through refusing to let their evil define our story, through choosing love over bitterness, through honoring those who sacrificed for us by living lives worthy of that sacrifice. I looked directly into the cameras broadcasting this moment around the world. If you're listening and you're in the middle of your own storm, hold on. The truth will emerge, justice will come. And on the other side, you will be stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than you ever imagined possible. Because you are not what was done to you. You are what you do with what was done to you. And that, my friends, makes all the difference. The applause was thunderous, deafening, overwhelming. Christopher joined me at the microphone, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. Together, we pulled the covering off the sculpture. As it was revealed, gleaming in the afternoon sun, something caught my eye. At the base of the memorial, someone had left 4 white roses, one for each parent, and a small card that read simply, "They would be so proud. A friend." There was no signature, no identification, but I knew. I knew that somewhere in this crowd, or watching from afar, were people whose lives had been touched by the Hart and Hamilton legacies. People who understood what sacrifice meant. People who believed that love was worth everything. And in that moment, standing beside my brother, with my husband's hand in mine, surrounded by a community we'd built from ashes and pain and loss, I felt complete. Not because the pain was gone, but because I'd transformed it into something greater than myself. I'd turned betrayal into a foundation for healing thousands. I'd turned lies into an unwavering commitment to truth. I'd turned loss into a legacy of love that would outlive us all. That evening, Derek and I stood on our apartment balcony, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The city lights twinkled like stars brought down to earth. "Penny for your thoughts?" Derek asked, handing me a cup of tea. "I was just thinking about that day," I said. "The day of Christopher's wedding, the worst day of my life, or so I thought at the time. And now? Now I realize it was the day my real life began. The day I stopped living in comfortable ignorance and started living in uncomfortable truth. And truth, no matter how painful, is always better than lies, no matter how beautiful." Derek pulled me close, and I felt the solid reality of him. Honest, present, real. "Do you regret any of it?" he asked gently. "Knowing what you know now, if you could go back and never find out, never have that pain, never discover the truth, would you?" I thought about it seriously, deeply. Would I choose comfortable lies over painful truth? Would I choose the illusion of Victor's love over the reality of Derek's? Would I choose never knowing Isabella, never understanding Margaret's sacrifice, never discovering the truth of who I really was? "No," I said firmly without hesitation. "I wouldn't change a single thing, because all of it, every betrayal, every revelation, every tear, every moment of agony,